wanted to take a little time to recap the last class. And so we talked about befriending your emotions last time. And that is basically taking an emotional temperature of how you're feeling. And no matter what feelings come up for you, whether those are typically labeled as good or typically labeled as bad, feelings are just feelings. And it's okay to have feelings that are typically labeled as something that may not be good. So if we're talking about anger or sadness or shame or guilt, we can always use those to learn from, but it's always important to get those emotions out so that we're not stuffing them in. It really harms us physically when we stuff our feelings, doesn't it? So we talked a little bit about that. And so for your homework, we had asked you to take your emotional temperature and see how you are feeling and if there's anything that you need to do to take some action towards healing. And so part of your homework too was to decide on what that one action is. What is one step that you can take towards healing your emotions? So, have you ever thought that death could be your friend? Have you ever thought about it in that way? This might be something that's new to you and um, maybe doesn't feel right when you think about it in that way. And, we've gotten some feedback regarding the first class. I don't know if you can think back that far to 2 classes ago, but got some feedback that it felt a little heavy and maybe we didn't expect that that's what we were going to be talking about when we're talking about courageous conversations. Um, and maybe that is because it surprises us when we talk about death in a conversational kind of way. And it's hard to think about that we could be talking about that and have a smile on our face, or to think about how thinking about death can help us live a more purposeful life. And that's kind of the message that we wanted to tell you all when we're talking about leaving a legacy, befriending your emotions, and thinking about how death can inform how you live your life with intention. And so as we're thinking about that, it's going to help us make some good choices about our healthcare, or make choices that resonate with us and our values about healthcare. And then in our next class in 2 weeks, we'll talk about how we can initiate that conversation with our loved ones and share what our choices are. So we want you to be empowered. We want you to know that you have a voice and a choice when it comes to your healthcare and everything in between. So from birth to death, we want you to know that you have a voice and a choice and autonomy, and we want you to be your authentic self and be free to do that. And sometimes thinking about death as a companion or as our friend can help us to live each day with intention. And so I wanted to show you a little video. It's called The Life of Death. And after we watch this little film, let's have a little discussion on what this film is trying to tell us. Terry, what does that video say to you?
I love that video the very first time I saw it because it brought in a relationship with death that we don't often think about, that death is there with us all the time. And I can't say that the deer actually bargained with death, but I think there was an understanding on both sides of that. And I think we have to remember that that's an important part of everything that we do and why we should live every day to the best that we possibly can.
Mhm.
Would somebody mind describing that for those of us who had to dial in by phone?
Oh, goodness. Yes. Okay. So it's a short film, and we're going to send this to all y'all in the recording email. So there's a recording of death or a drawing of death, and the way they draw death is kind of almost animal-like, but it's in black and the face is a little hidden and they've got kind of human hands. And so when the creatures in the forest are touched by his hands, of course, it's their time to die. Well, he encounters a deer and they frolic together in the forest and he goes to touch the deer and then he draws his hand back because he's not sure. He doesn't want that deer to die. It's not time for that deer to go. And so he's just kind of companioning that deer as the deer runs through the forest with her friends. As she sleeps, he shields her from the rain. And um, they kind of even have a little joking manner about them sometimes, a playful little manner sometimes together. And sometimes he's just watching her as she plays and runs with her friends. And then finally, she reaches the point where she was watching her other dear friends run off and her body just can't do it anymore. She's getting tired. She's getting to the end of her life. And so she approaches death, but death doesn't want to touch her still. And so she walks up to him and she nestles her nose in his hand as if to say, I'm ready. It's time for me and it's okay. and then they embrace, and then that's the end of the deer's life. And that part always gets me. So, um, and so the question
Thank you.
is, yeah, the question is, you're welcome. What do you notice about death? What do you notice about the deer? And could you put yourself in the place of either one? Could you put yourself in the place of death and being afraid to reach out, and because you know that people are scared of you, um and not wanting that embrace, but could you put yourself in the place of the deer as well and say, I've lived a full and great life, and this is a choice that I'm making, is that it's time for me to go and it's okay. So um any thoughts about that, or even what do you think it would be like to have death companioning you throughout your life? If that's scary for you, that's okay to voice that. If it's comforting to you, or if it's making you curious, any of those thoughts.
I was actually glad you took the opportunity to explain it in your own words, because it seemed, you're trying to interpret the whole thing as it's going along. Like, where's this going, or how is this going to work, and how does death really, where is death's place in our real life, realistically, right? And not as part of a cartoon, like. And so I think it's just interesting to see that perspective. And personally, I've never been afraid of death because of um, my faith and values and beliefs. But, it's still mysterious. It's still a bit anxiety provoking, I guess, just because we're not promised tomorrow. So things I would leave behind, things unsaid, that probably bothers me more so than actually dying. It's not really about me, but about what's left behind.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Christy, because that's exactly why Terry and I and Kelly do the work that we do. Kelly, our guest tonight, is also an end-of-life coach and doula. And doing the work that we've been doing here in this class is what is so important. Talking about what am I leaving behind and coming to terms with that, being very intentional about our legacy, being very intentional about our emotions, relationships, as Kelly described with her sister, and doing that work, doing work around the questions that I asked you in the beginning about your physical comfort and what brings you happiness and joy, and also doing the work about making those healthcare choices and finding what your values are and coming into alignment with those values when talking about healthcare. And so doing that work ahead of time, like you all are choosing to do right now, is what helps us to befriend death in the way that we saw in the video, and where, as death can be our constant companion, it reminds us to remember how we're leaving a legacy and remember how we're living each day to the fullest. So I appreciate how you say that it's not the moment of death that's scary. It's, am I going to get everything done before it's my time? So I think that's a very relatable feeling. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd love to just weigh in and add to what Christina said. Like, I don't feel frightened about death itself, but the wasting away is certainly, that's kind of where my anxiety is. Like, if I could have sudden death, I think I would be much more, I'd be into that. They always say, like, go to sleep and, never wake up. Like, that would be the ultimate. But the idea of like withering away feels much harder.
Mm-hmm.
And in the video, I don't think so I never think of death as like, the scary sight and all that stuff. but I never have really thought about it as my friend. So I think that's an interesting construct. Like when it was like protecting the deer from the rain, I was like, oh, so death could be somehow protective of me in some ways. So maybe it's around my concern about withering away, like death is whatever, keeping an eye on that, trying to make sure I don't suffer that way. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that we all have our different interpretation of what the video is saying to us. And I think that each time I see it, I'm in a different place in my life. And so it means something different to me each time. And the more I learn about myself and the more I grow and change in certain thoughts that I have, it kind of changes. So, and it's interesting too, Kelly, that you say that about what's my body going to be like when I start to approach that? And so another way to think about death sometimes as maybe a healer. So when you think about your body and how when you start to approach death and you don't know, it's hard to tell in the future what it's going to be like. So establishing those values and thinking about, okay, when my body reaches this state, what do I want to do? What do I want my healthcare decisions to be? And so that's another way to think about death is like it can heal me actually from some disease that I might have or some suffering that I might be in the middle of. So when we think about how as a society we've kind of shied away from talking about death in such a direct way as we're doing tonight. And so we've come up with some euphemisms, maybe that we say instead of somebody died. So if you can think of some that we have maybe started to say, like, this is kind of crass, but like kick the bucket, well, that my dog kicked the bucket last night, or maybe passed on is a typical euphemism that we use, went over the rainbow bridge or went home, those kinds of things. So we try to avoid using the word for some reason. So I was wondering, as I was thinking about that, so have you ever thought about kind of putting that death dread aside and embracing a more like empowered view of your final wishes? So again, we're exploring that today, making healthcare choices while you're healthy, while right now, so that when we do reach that state where our body does start to fail, that it's going to lead to a smoother journey for us and for your loved ones too. So the medical world is full of different options, but it's definitely not a one size fits all situation. And in a moment, we'll explore a little bit about what does do no harm mean? We've heard that a lot in the medical world. So what does that really mean? So making wise choices today can minimize future stress. And so I'm sure a lot of you have probably been through some health kind of issues or maybe even had some scares and that kind of thing. And so a lot of times we kind of let the healthcare system or our doctors take the driver's seat when it comes to that. But I want you to know that you are in the driver's seat. So remember, the healthcare system is a guide and could kind of help us along and give us our options, but ultimately you're in the driver's seat and the choices that you make are yours alone. So when we wish or we pray for healing for someone that we care about, what is that healing that we're wishing for exactly? So when you think about death in that way as healing the body, it kind of puts a different perspective on that, I think. So if we have that do no harm mindset, your definition of harm might be different than mine is, and maybe different from Kelly's or Terry's. And so each one of us has that line that's according to our values as to what our healthcare decisions are. So defining what that line is before the emergency comes is what is very important. And it's exactly why we're thinking about that tonight, is we want to get your mind thinking, what is kind of my line in the sand, or what are my values, so that I can make that decision ahead of time before it gets to be an emergency, or so that my family can know what my decisions are and they can have that confidence and not second guess themselves. So know yourself, know your wishes, so that you can make your healthcare choices with confidence. And that inner compass is your values and is what you desire, and it's what your definition of quality of life is. So when we thought about that, when we talked about our legacy statement in class 1, we did that little exercise, kind of a know yourself exercise. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. We explored our values and what matters most. And that same self-discovery is the key to making confident healthcare choices. So if you haven't gotten around to doing that yet, go back to class 1 and watch that video and make that legacy statement. And you might be wondering what that has to do with your doctors and the hospitals, but knowing your values and what's important to you directly translates to making healthcare choices that align with your wishes. So for instance, if living life to the fullest is a core value for you, then knowing that might influence your decisions about treatment options. So maybe you would prioritize therapies that allow you to stay active, or maybe you would not choose certain therapies in order to maintain a quality of life. All right. So Terry, I would like for you to introduce our guest officially because she has a story for us that I think you'll find interesting.
If I can get my computer to do right, and y'all, we have thunderstorms all around me. So if I am missing again, that's what's going on right now. We are very pleased and honored to have Kelly with us tonight. She was actually a student in a class that Ashley taught, and I was the OTA through Conscious Dying Institute. And Kelly has a very unique look into healthcare and life. We wanted you to hear her story firsthand and how her values defined and led her to her healthcare choices. And during her talk, I think she'll let us know if her values changed or if choices changed, because she's not just had one diagnosis, she's had a couple. So, Kelly, we want to thank you for being here tonight with us. And she's going to hang around. So, if there's any questions after we get through that you would like for her to answer, she'll certainly try, or we will as well. But, Kelly, tell us a little bit about your healthcare journey and what's going on with you.
Thanks, Terry, and thanks, Ashley. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Bias, and I'm happy to be here tonight with all of you. Yeah, let's see, where can I start? I'm an oncology nurse by background. That's where I started my career. I then worked as a nurse practitioner for a number of years, and then worked in the pharmaceutical industry for a large portion of my career also. And as Terry and Ashley said, I have had cancer 4 times now. I was first diagnosed when I was, I guess, 18 with a malignant melanoma. That was an easy, I mean, that's a deadly cancer, but I was lucky enough to have an early stage disease or diagnosis at that time. So they just did surgery, and then I went on to be a young woman enjoying life. And then at age 30, I had a breast cancer diagnosis. So fairly devastating to have a diagnosis like that at age 30. It was aggressive disease, but it had been found early. So it was scary because it was aggressive disease, but the surgeons and the medical oncologists said, we'll be able to cure you of this, but it will require surgery, radiation, chemotherapy. So I did all of that, and then was able to kind of close the chapter on that. Then at age 45, I had another diagnosis of breast cancer. They considered it a delayed recurrence. So not, it was the same breast cancer, but it showed up a lot later than they would have expected. And they said that was good news, that the previous treatment they had given me actually had worked. it had delayed the possibility of a recurrence till much later in my life. So at that point, I had a mastectomy. Same thing, though. The pathology was aggressive, but they had found it when it was still small. So I had a mastectomy and chemotherapy. And then a few years ago, it was October of 21, I showed up to the emergency room when visiting my sister in Lake Placid, New York, in what I thought was an appendicitis. And I was diagnosed with an appendix cancer. And so that is the diagnosis that I'm currently living with and dealing with. It is, it's a rare cancer. You probably have never heard of it, even though I was an oncology nurse and have been in healthcare my entire professional life. I had never heard of anybody with an appendix cancer. So it's very rare. And usually people are diagnosed in an advanced stage, similar to ovarian cancer. They don't screen for appendix cancer. And once, sometimes they're discovered when someone has, appendicitis, and sometimes they're diagnosed early, but typically they're diagnosed in a later stage when people have symptoms, which is what happened for me. So I'm considered a stage 4 cancer patient. I've had metastatic spread to my internal organs. I've had multiple surgeries and I've had chemotherapy. And I'm actually currently with a recurrence. And it's kind of perfect timing to have this conversation with you all, because I just went through, meeting with my doctors and understanding what my options were for this recurrence and having to be empowered to make a decision that makes sense for me. And I realized that, if any of you on the call were in my shoes, you might have chosen a different approach than what I'm choosing. And so I'm getting ready to start radiation therapy next week. But I came to that conclusion after talking to surgeons who said, yeah, we could take this out. We could remove this. But there might be a chance that you would have a colostomy. And I said, that for me, and for any of you who know what a colostomy is, that's when they basically bring your intestines to the wall of your abdomen and you would actually defecate into a bag, that's on your abdomen. And that's what a colostomy is. And, I've had so much surgery. I have scars everywhere. My body looks very different than it did 25 years ago. And having a colostomy is one of those kind of lines that I'm not willing to cross at this point. And the surgeon even said to me when I said, well, I don't want a colostomy, he's like, well, better to be alive with a colostomy than dead. And I actually said, actually, no, for me, that's not true. So I don't want a colostomy under any circumstance. And since we are at a point with my disease where I'm never going to be cured of it, we're only going to be controlling this diagnosis. That is one of the lines I'm not going to cross. And so after making that statement and having that conversation with him, we both agreed that radiation therapy was the right choice for me. So I will avoid the colostomy and I will also take care of this recurrence. So that's one example. I know, in the course of my life with these multiple diagnoses, I actually have many examples where the healthcare system, the surgeon, the medical oncologist, the doctors had a plan for me that was kind of cookie cutter. This is what we're going to do. And I would ask questions. Well, what if I want this? For instance, when I had my mastectomy, there were multiple options of the type of mastectomy and the type of reconstruction that would be available. And for me, the most important thing was that I had less scars on my body. So, there's some procedures where they can take flaps, move, muscles from your back to your chest, or move a muscle from your belly to your chest. And I didn't want any of those because I already have a lot of scars. I want more. I'm also very active. I run, I walk, I cycle, I do yoga. And so I weightlift. I didn't want muscles moved from areas of my body. So I said, I only want I want an implant. I want a fake, a silicone implant put under my skin to create a breast. I don't want my muscles moved. And I actually had to fire one of the surgeons because she was like, are you sure? Blah, blah. And I was like, no, I'm sure this is the option I want. And she was like, well, I don't know. And I said, well, if you don't feel confident about the procedure, then I don't feel confident with you as my surgeon. And so I found another surgeon. So I've had opportunities to discover what really is important to me. And those have to do with my treatment, but I know Ashley was really setting the stage for, considering for my death, what's important for me also. And I have very specific lines that won't be crossed when we start talking about dying too, my death, and what I will want and what I won't want. So I won't want to be, given nutrition and hydration once I'm, unconscious or, barely conscious, because those things actually will prolong my death and dying. And I don't want that. And so I've been discovering, I guess, through this process of being sick, through this process of doing studying to be a death doula, I've just learned more about myself and learned more about what's important to me, and started to get really clear on what those things are, so that I can live every day joyously. And I do actually. I actually live every day joyously. I've shared a very depressing part of my life, but I'm actually a really happy person. And I consider myself very lucky and blessed and grateful and privileged to be in the position to be making decisions for myself like the ones I've made. So I'll stop there because I want to make sure Ashley and Terry, if they have specific anything else they want me to share, you could ask me.
Kelly, I have one question because those of us that are over 45 were raised that, your physician tells you what to do. And if he tells you to jump off the river bridge, you ask him at what point on the river bridge do you jump off? And it's very difficult, I think, for everyone to look at a physician and go, are you sure? But what if that's not what I want? And I had that conversation with my PCP within the last 2 weeks, because my children decided I needed to go visit him. And I told him some of my health history was none of his business. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And we had a bantering. We did back and forth. But tell me, because I know you've been through it, where'd you draw strength to be able to look at somebody and go, oh, nope.
Yeah, no, it's great question. And yeah, I guess I have an inner knowing about myself. I believe in my physicians. I spend time finding the doctors that I want to take care of me. That's the first thing. And sometimes I find out that the person I chose isn't the right one. So that surgeon I told you about was at my second breast cancer. She did the mastectomy, but when we were preparing for my reconstruction, I realized she actually wasn't the right surgeon for me, because she wasn't listening to what was important to me. She kept, saying, but this is what we do. This is what we do, or this is what we should do. And yeah, she wasn't hearing what was important to me. So I just said, it came down to imagining going under the knife with this person who was not seeing things the way I was seeing things. And I was like, that's too scary for me. Like, she might do something under the knife that I don't agree with. And so I just had to say, I'm going to find someone who will hear what I have to say and will put me under anesthesia, saying, yeah, we're doing what she wants. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, it's a little scary to tell the expert no, but I feel very well informed with, I make the decisions from a very informed place. Like, I'm not being lackadaisical or just obstinate. I'm thinking through what they tell me is important about the decisions, and then I match it with what's important to me.
I think it's important to always remember that we should choose our healthcare professionals and really look at, are they a good fit? And if they're not, it's okay to change, because we're going to get ready to talk about some of that. So I'm going to let Kelly breathe, and I think she's still going to be here at the end, so that if you've got any questions you want to ask her, you certainly can. But I would like for Ashley to go back and let me look at our next slide so that I can get hungry. Everybody's like, what? What I would like to do while she's getting our slide back up is just tell everybody to take a deep breath. I know some of this can be, this is kind of a heavy thing again, but I think if we look at it in the fact that what we want is, we want to be able to be in charge of the things that are being done for us. And how do we do that? We are going to unlock our healthcare superpower. And that all starts with what your favorites are. Favorites we talked about earlier: your favorite color, your favorite smell, your favorite vacation site. But we also have favorites related to our health care. And Kelly talked about that as well. She had lines. These are things that are important to her that she wasn't going to cross through each section she went to. Those can change, certainly, as we go through our journey in healthcare. But it's okay for them to change as long as we are actively involved, and it's our decision with our healthcare professionals to do that. So what I want you to think about is the favorites. It could be what we're looking at on the screen, and it could have sprinkles on top of it, or it could have cream cheese in it. But what I want us to talk about for the next few minutes are about fundamental, awesome values and essentials to you, because those are actually non-negotiables of life. Think about your safety, your comfort, and the things that make you feel like you. They're your secret sauce to your happy place. Now I want you to take the healthcare goals that you have, the things that are important to you, and I want you to think of them like a personalized roadmap. Does it take you to places that align with the favorite things that are important to you? If not, it may be time for a little course correction along the way. Your healthcare goals should absolutely reflect who you are. Or are you following someone else's script? Like Kelly talked about doctors coming in, we have paths in healthcare, and this is the path that we do if you have a COPD, or if you have a heart problem, or if you have cancer. This is the path that insurance expects us to take. But that's not always the best for everybody, and your journey should be your path, your roadmap, and not necessarily theirs. So we want you to look at those, unlock it, know what your desires and wishes are, get it into a roadmap, and do they reflect who you are? Living your best life? Why are we here tonight when we consider ourselves fairly healthy? Why are we even talking about this? I think our video might have gotten us thinking about that, but it's a good question. We don't ever know when our final curtain call arrives. And so we need to understand that and understand that we're not here forever. And that is usually a powerful motivator for us. It can nudge us just a little bit to ask, what's truly important to me? What matters to me? And how can I make the most of this amazing adventure? Every day, before we lay our head down, we need to have something that sparks joy from the day. And every morning when we get up, we also need to have that same thing. What I want us to do is to normalize our conversation. Whether we're talking turkey or we're talking tuna salad, we want to talk about your healthcare wishes. And Kelly lightly touched on the fact that healthcare decisions are not always known for lively banter. The doctor tells us what we're going to do. Routinely, we do what he says. But guess what? If you have your wishes, they are just as important to you as the path the doctor has. And what we want to do is choose our wishes, and then we want to put our voice behind that, and we want to share these with someone, because without sharing with a trusted person, your desires are just only known inside you. And when something happens, they may not be honored. So we want to make that healthcare journey reflect what matters most to us, to you. Like Ashley said earlier, the next class, we're going to dive into some fun and practical ways to make your wishes be known. But now it's time for us to take some action. Do you remember us talking about our Calming Cove last week? We're going to go further, and we're going to go to a mission. Whether you choose to accept it or not, it's Operation Cozy Corner. We want you to unlock your personal comfort cove. Your mission starts tonight, and we're going to uncover, and we're going to go undercover and act as comfort concierge. I want you to grab your trusty journal or your iPad if you take notes on it. And here's what I want you to look at. Our first mission objective is defining your comfort zone. I want you to write or type in comfort is, and then I want you to stop and think. Is it a warm blanket? Is it soothing music? Could be hard rock for me. Or that feeling of accomplishment when you cross something off your to-do list. Do you have that list that you need to work on? Some of you may be poets. Some of you may be able to write a wonderful paragraph of what you're thinking that captures what comfort means for you. Make it any way you want to, but sometimes just simply writing words brings things together for you. If you have a hard time starting, close your eyes and just think about comfort. And whatever words come to you, jot them down. Our objective number 2 is weaving comfort into your week. Now that we've got the code, let's integrate it into your busy week. I want you to think of one small thing, an actionable step that you can take within the next 7 to 10 days, because we're going to be back in 2 weeks, to ensure that you have a dose of that comfortable feeling in your real life now. An example might be making a phone call to reconnect with someone you love, someone you hadn't talked to in a while. Maybe you got mad. Maybe they just quit calling and you weren't the one that called. Maybe that's a great call for you to make. Maybe you've tucked something away that's really important to you and it's in storage and you miss it. Go find it. Start a list of decluttering if that's important to you. If it gives you a sense of calm, having that list and knowing what you can check off that's simple. The key is to choose something that feels manageable and directly connects to your definition of comfort. Remember, small baby steps make a big difference in life's journey. Not only this, but this week you have an opportunity to make some bonus points with yourself and with us. We would like for you to share your comfort code creation or your action step with a family or friend, because talking about your comfort can be a great way to connect with somebody, even somebody you've known all your life. But if you've never really asked them what brings them comfort, you don't have that bond, and it will bring things out that you've never seen or heard from them. Next week, we're going to go to Operation Official Cozy. We hope you're starting to feel good about a comfort zone that you can gel into when your emotions are high, but also a place that you can share with others to help support you feeling comfortable. But we want it to translate into real life action. Next week, we are going to crack down on the code of transforming your comfortable cove, your core values and wishes into an official plan. Think of it as creating your very own personal healthcare roadmap. We need those roadmaps. We need to be in control, and someone you love needs to know what your roadmap looks like, who can stand in that place for you when you may not be able to tell the doctor what you would like. We hope you've enjoyed tonight, and we've made it through the storms going across Tennessee without losing everything. And that is a wonderful thing tonight that I'm really glad we were able to do. I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything they would like to ask us or Kelly, or just discussions on your comfortable cove, or do you already have an action step in mind you'd like to do? You can share it with us tonight. We'll hold you accountable if you want us to.
I was just going to thank you, Kelly, for sharing your story. I'm a nurse practitioner as well, and I'm just curious how your decision to be in healthcare affected your ability to self-advocate. So, having sat in the hospital for 10 days with my father-in-law this past week, there's literally no place in our healthcare system for self-advocacy. And it takes a lot of digging heels in and sometimes even being ugly, to protect a person's values or beliefs. So I just wondered if you had any tips because you've had the experience of being on both sides of the coin, of how we can better self-advocate for ourselves when we feel like someone's not listening.
No, you raise a huge point, Christine. I frequently have said, like, I don't know how other people would do this. Because I do feel like I have this, experience that helps me with my personal scenario. But I guess if I was to give advice, it would be around finding advocates. So maybe, I think a lot of people have a nurse somewhere in their life. Or maybe it's a nurse in their primary care office or a doctor. So I know, like, my primary care, she doesn't have anything really to do with what's happening with me other than to be on the sidelines, but I actually could use her if I needed to. So if I wasn't, if I didn't have my experience as a nurse practitioner, I might suggest to someone, like, ask your primary care to help advocate for you or help you to understand the options that are at play. So, like, having someone that you trust to say, like, they're telling me I should do this and this and this, but that doesn't feel right. What do you think? Right. So finding an advocate who can help you. So it sounds like you're going with your family member. That's always a good plan, having someone with you. So I try to have someone, even though I feel like I can handle it by myself, it's always still good for me to have my husband with me, because he doesn't have a medical background, but he always has the best question to ask that I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. So, having two people in the office so that we walk out and I'm like, what did you hear? This is what I heard. This is how I felt coming out of it. And a lot of times, again, my husband will say, wow, I actually thought it was a good appointment. Here's what I got out of it. And I'm like, oh, okay. So, it's always good to get another perspective. So I don't know if I answered. I guess, yeah, finding an advocate, someone that you do trust, who could maybe help you if you're feeling like the plan feels hard, or like, I don't know if I want to do that plan. I mean, one of the things I didn't share with you guys, another place where I was kind of a bad patient, I didn't, when I had to have chemo for the appendix cancer, it was adjuvant treatment. But this time, which means that they're giving it to prevent a recurrence. So they're not treating actual cancer in me, but they're giving it to me in hopes I don't get a recurrence. But I also knew that they don't have enough studies to prove that that's helpful in appendix cancer. And they were using a regimen that was for colon cancer. And I know that the regimen for colon cancer, they've done studies to show 3 months is as good as 6 months. But if you give 6 months, there's double the side effects. So basically, I was like, I'm not taking 6 months of this. I'm only taking 3. And they kind of pushed me on it because they said it's not colon cancer, you have different. So I split the difference and I ended up doing 2/3 of the regimen. But I cut out 4 treatments because I was like, I don't want it. I've had enough. And there's not a moment that I regret that, even though I'm dealing with recurrence and whatever. Like, I'm not carrying that around like, oh, it's because I didn't take all that chemo. So
I think that everybody that has joined this series is kind of doing what you're asking, to think about things,
yeah.
to get some thoughts and processes in place. I wished we had a doula for everyone on the face of this earth that could stand there and say, let's make some plans now, so then when something happens, we know what you want and we know how to look at the healthcare people that we're working with. I remember when I worked in the nursing home, I had a man that was admitted. His wife walked in with her 3-inch black binder that had all their medical things, all their legal things. She had everything he wanted done. And she walked into me and she said, here's the binder. You can read it or you can listen to me. But today I'm tired and I know I'm going to lose my husband. And y'all, that stopped me in my tracks but he had already made decisions for himself. And she said, all I need you to do is honor his wishes. And y'all, this was over 20 years ago. So we can be better prepared. And part of that is just doing some of the simple things we're talking about now. We can't relive days for the people that are older than us that have not done it, but we certainly can as we're moving forward and making conversations better. Talking about death, there is nothing wrong with it. We do it every week. Sunday seems to become our favorite pastime that we talk about something new that's come up. By the way, today I learned about compostable urns that they use in Canada, and your ashes are actually put in that, and they put tree seeds in that are native to the area that you're going to plant it in, and that's how you become the tree. So that's my tidbit for today, is that there's always something new that we can learn and see, but we need that to grow. And we are always here to support you and offer any resources. Christy and Stephanie have a wealth of resources through engaging communities. So it's all about all of us working together and helping people to walk that healthcare journey. Ashley, I'm going to turn it over to you.
To me. Well, thank you for hanging in there with us. I wanted to bring this guest in, and Terry and I wanted to bring this guest in, and Kelly, we appreciate you coming because you just embody what we envision communicating to people who maybe this is a new concept, in making those choices and speaking up for yourself and being that advocate for yourself. And I appreciate the question that Christy brought up, and how can you find that voice within you when you've never discovered what that voice might be? How do you find the strength? Terry asked her earlier tonight. And if we have to bring somebody with us to prop us up and be our strength sometimes, there's no shame in that either. I feel like even with the smallest of tests that I have run, that I want somebody there with me to be a support to me. And so as Terry said, we will want to be a support to you. Christy and Stephanie, your support to you. And Kelly, thank you so much for sharing your story with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And we will see you all in 2 weeks, where we will talk about how we're going to implement our choices and share those with those around us and normalize the conversation. Thank y'all so much for being here.